Hello, everyone. I grew up in a cult, forced to get married at 18, and I was a victim of domestic violence. I've had 3 near-death experiences. The first was getting run down by a car, but I went over, not under, so that was a good thing. I rolled my car, took out a pole, went down an embankment, and I was in a terrorist attack. I'm sharing this with you today because these experiences have really shaped my core belief that life is too short not to make every day count, and that everyone deserves to come to work every day and feel valued and empowered. I've spent the last 15 years successfully creating these environments and building great teams. Wouldn't it be awesome if all of us could create these environments where our teams could thrive? And that's what today's about. I'm here to share with you what I've learned and some easy strategies to build great teams. I've worked with lots of subject matter experts, generally very deep technical people, that have progressed into team lead and manager roles. And they generally want a bit of help in making sense of what people want. And the questions that they ask me the most are, how do you get interviewing right and make sure that you don't hire the wrong people into your team? How do you motivate people and keep your team engaged? And how do you handle those tricky conversations with people? So in this talk today, I'm going to run through a life cycle of building, growing, nourishing a high-performing team. And I'll provide you with some easy tips and examples for each area. My husband's Irish, and he has a bit of a running joke about all the words that us Australians pronounce the same that most other countries pronounce differently or correctly. For example, barley and barley. So I'm using one as my theme today, which is from hire to hire. So if you're in here today, you all have some sort of team, whether there's 2 of you, 5 of you, 100 of you, 1,000 of you. There's already an existing culture in place. So to build a solid foundation, the 3 areas that we're going to look at are values, vision, and engagement strategy. And by engagement strategy, I don't mean a HRE thing. I mean something that as a team leader, as a manager, you can create something really simple and easy to make sure that you engage your team. So culture is really made up of the values, beliefs, and behaviours that are shared, and more importantly, that are actually demonstrated across the team. These values can be organisational-wide or they can be team-wide. It depends on your company and how clear the values are. It's really important to break them down to a team level so that they are actually meaningful to the team. You can call them different things. I've seen people call them principles, call them tenets, a team charter, but basically the purpose is that you can use them to make your day-to-day decisions on. You can also use them to recognise, reward and celebrate individual behaviours and team behaviours that reflect the values and the culture that you're trying to create. I've been part of creating values from scratch in organisations. Now I'm at AWS, who have leadership principles. And genuinely, every day when we're having discussions and making decisions, we use those principles to make our decisions. So it makes empowerment a lot easier if you have those really strong values or principles to base your decisions on. Culture is also always morphing and changing as well. So you want to be able to iterate on these. Just because you create something doesn't mean it has to stay the same forever. So I know the AWS leadership principles, a couple got taken out and a couple of new ones got put in the last couple of years. So it's important to keep improving all the time. What's the purpose of coming to work every day? Do you know why your teams come to work every day? What's your company trying to achieve? And what are your teams trying to achieve? Sometimes these can be really difficult questions to answer. And often a high-level company vision, if there is one, still needs to then be broken down so that it's meaningful for the team and relevant. Once you've got that vision, you then also need to break it down into clear goals so that everybody understands what equals success for your company, what equals success for the team, and what equals success for you as an individual. OKRs are very popular, so that stands for objectives and key results. Do a bit of Googling on that if you haven't come across them. But they're a really great way to tie goals and KPIs into a vision or into a higher level purpose. A couple of my favourite books that talk about vision is Simon Sinek's How to Find Your Why. That is correct, isn't it? I feel like that's backwards. So that really talks you through how to figure out what your purpose is. And there's also some team-based activities, so you can actually do it for your team to find your team's why. And the other one is Dan Pink's book Drive, and that has a very large section around purpose and how important it is. So the engagement strategy. If you want to have a high-performing team, you really need to have a plan of how you're going to engage your team. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So I'm not talking anything super complicated. I'm talking a 1 to 2 pager made up of some bullet points and some cadences. The key areas that need to be on this, other than what we've already talked about with values and vision, is collaboration and connection. It's human nature to want connection, and as leaders, we need to create regular opportunities for our teams to connect and collaborate. So a simple cadence around what type of events and when they're going to happen, how regular, is all that's required. Transparency and communication is the next area. So people want and need regular and transparent communication. And as leaders, we need to create different methods to suit different preferred styles. So it's important to understand the individuals in your team and how they like to receive and give communication so that you can tailor these things to suit. Another area I find that gets missed a lot is people also need to know where and how to communicate. So the bigger your company gets, the more complicated the tools get. So many awesome collaboration tools, but where do you go for what? So actually making that clear to people around where to go for what is really important, and that's part of your communication plan. And then the third area is reward and recognition. How do you show your team that they're valued? There are lots of different ways to do this. A nice easy one is verbally saying thank you to people. It's amazing how uncommon this is. There's things like Yammer Praise, there's LinkedIn Kudos, there's lots of different recognition apps and recognition platforms. Awards programs are really popular, and also I would highly recommend awards programs. And of course, rewards. Everybody likes a voucher or a gift every now and then. Reward and recognition doesn't have to be expensive. When I implemented my first recognition program, we had no budget at all. So I created a Living the Values Awards program each month, and peers would send an email through and nominate another peer for a Living the Value Award. And we'd select a monthly winner, we'd print out a A4 award, and we'd put it in a frame. And people really liked that. And 18 months later, I would walk past people's desks and they'd have a frame on their desk with their award. So it doesn't have to cost money. So here's an example of what a really basic collaboration and connection plan might look like. The statistics are that people stay at companies if they have a good team, even if they hate their job. So it's really important that you want your team to get along and be engaged. So can't really read my writing here. So having some clear connection types around, some group professional development or some training, end of month events, social club events, team meetings, just deciding what's going to work for my team and how am I going to keep my team engaged and connected. The important thing here is inclusivity. A lot of people forget, part-timers. You've got someone in your team and they don't work on a Friday or they don't work on a Monday, but yet you always have a team meeting on that day. So it's really important as a leader, as a senior member of the team, that you think about inclusiveness when you're coming up with these types of strategies. Also, social club events. It's great to go to the pub, but not everybody likes drinking. So making sure that you rotate and you do different types of connection events so that everybody feels included. Lots of people, certainly in the companies that I work for, the average age is getting slightly higher and a lot of people have children now. So if all of your events are going to be after work, some people aren't going to be able to attend. So it doesn't mean that you can't do things where some people can't attend, but it means you need to have rotation and you need to have variety so that you're inclusive for different people. An example of the communication plan. So once again, the types of communication, how you're going to communicate with your team and how regularly. This doesn't mean that you have to do everything as the leader. It doesn't mean that you have to be the one writing all the comms. One of the companies that I worked for, project teams would do a weekly update to the whole company, and they would rotate those responsibilities throughout the team. Different people would write the little update each week, but it was on the engagement strategy that this was one of the ways that we communicated transparently across the company, and it worked really well. And this is an example of the where to go, so the channels. If you're looking for what information, where are you going to go to find that information? This is really good for onboarding new starters as well, because one of the things as a new person, it's really hard to figure out, everybody knows in their head where to go, but it's generally not written down anywhere. So having a visible place that recognises behaviours helps drive that values-based culture. So this is a recognition app, Shout Out. It's actually one that my team created because we couldn't find anything that was just easy to use and cost effective. But having somewhere where people can recognise publicly to help drive that culture is really beneficial. And then tying it into your awards program as well so that it gets management and leadership recognition is also important. Once again, if you don't have budget for these types of things, that's totally fine. A couple of the best companies that I know love post-it walls. So they just have a wall and they use post-its for recognition to say, you know, thanks to their teammates and shout out great work, and they just use a post-it wall. So you don't have to spend money to do these things, but you do have to do them if you want to keep your team engaged. So you've got the foundations and now you want to grow your team. The last thing that you want to do is hire people into the team who don't have the skills or capability or don't add to the culture or fit into the culture. And that's the first change in language that I really recommend. A lot of the time we say, oh, we're searching for culture fit. We want someone who's a good culture fit. I prefer to use the term culture add because culture doesn't stay the same. It is always morphing and changing. So don't look for someone who's the same. Look for someone who's going to add to your culture. And this will make it a better place to work. There are a few things that you will have influence over as a senior team member or a team lead or a manager. One is helping point your recruiters to where the talent is and how to engage them. Two is interviews. So generally you'll be asked to input into the technical interviewing process or the technical testing process, and also what questions you ask when you're doing an interview. So how do you assess the culture add when you're doing your interview? And the third one is contributing to your employer brand so that you can attract the best talent. And to build a great team, you do need to hire the best people. Put your hand up if you find it really easy to find great technical talent. Yes, no one. I thought there might be one. It's really hard, right? Really, really hard. So as a leader, we need to help. Some of the things that you can do is definitely help your recruiters find potential candidates directly or indirectly. One of the ways you can do this is getting involved in community. So hosting, talking, attending meetups. Give your recruiter a target list of people, places, groups, conferences that they can get involved with and go and spend some time at. And encourage your company to sponsor. You know, look at all the sponsors here today. It's amazing. I can guarantee you every single one of those sponsors is looking to hire people as well. Use social media to promote your people and your team and your companies and your projects. You know, LinkedIn and Twitter work very well from a business perspective, and engage your team to do this as well. You know, remind your team to promote this type of stuff. Referrals is a lifesaver. You know, so many times I've gone and said to my team, oh, we really need a senior developer. Does anyone have some referrals they can send through? And straight away, I'll get, you know, at least 2 referrals come through. And I'm thinking to myself, we've been looking for senior developers for the last 6 weeks, but people just don't think about it unless you give them a poke and a reminder, because everyone's got their own job to do, right? So it's really important as a senior person or as a lead that you're reminding people about referrals. Where I've been most successful building great teams, we've had a percentage of referral hiring up to 70%. It's a huge competitive advantage if you can get 70% of your people through referrals rather than having to rely on other methods. So feeding into technical requirements of job adverts is the other thing that most people get an opportunity to get involved with. So if I'm looking for a senior full stack developer, what skills do they need to have that need to go into the job advert? I just want you to think in your heads for a moment of the bullet points that you would put in an advert if you were looking for a senior full stack developer and what that would look like. In my experience, people normally come up with about 7 to 10, and in most job adverts there's about 7 to 10 bullet points. I would say consider what is absolutely 100% necessary, because normally you can cover this in just 2 or 3 bullet points. And when it comes to advertising, less is more. Every point you add on the list is creating a potential objection and stopping someone from applying. And it's taking up room that you could be using to sell your company. People know what their experience is. They know what they can do. They know what a full stack developer is. And they can work wherever they want. So use your job adverts to take the time to actually sell your company about why they should come and work for you and work with you. And why they should invest the quite lengthy amount of time in your interview process, because normally, it takes a fair bit of investment to go through someone's interview process. The other tip on advertising, I would say, is use a gender-neutral type of tool like Textio. There's a bunch of them that are available for free, but you can run a tool over your wording and it will just come back and let you know what the gender-neutral tones are so that you can adjust it, because you just don't want to create more objections. You want it to be to get as many people to apply as possible. So here's a bit of an example of the structure that I like to use. Although I would say it's great to mix it up and experiment. Like everything that we do, there's nothing wrong with experimenting. One of the best adverts I ever wrote was just 2 paragraphs of text talking about how awesome the company was and what we did. And my CEO saw it and was like, this is the worst advert I've ever seen in my life. I hate it. And we got one of the best staff members that we've ever hired in that 5 years apply from overseas to that advert. So it's really, really important to try different things and experiment and learn if it fails, of course. So anyway, this is kind of a standard template that I'd go with. So the first one is about the company. Who are you? What do you do? We've been around for 15 years and blah, blah, blah. Not the boring stuff. Who do you help? Who do you add value to? Who are your customers? Really meaningful stuff, because that's what people care about. And then after that, it's about what can this person add value to? What will they get to help? Who will they get to, make a difference to? Because that's what people care about. So be really careful that they're the areas that you're looking at, not just the facts that are on the website, because everyone's going to go to your website and read that. It's not very engaging most of the time. And then if you have to have bullet points, and I would say you don't have to have bullet points, but if you have to have your bullet points, then this is where you'd put it. And I would always say a maximum of 3, and the real essentials that people must have. And then take most of the time to talk about your benefits. Why should someone come and join your company? What are all the different things that you have to offer? A lot of people think that a lot of benefits are standard, but actually they're not. So you'd be surprised what things other companies might have that you don't. And the final tip on here is, ideally put an actual person that someone can talk to, or an email that actually goes to a person that they might reply to. I know this seems a bit crazy in, the AI world that is job screening now, but you know what IT is like. It's 1 degree of separation. There's plenty of great people that won't be comfortable to apply to a job advert. They want to actually get to talk to someone and just suss it out and make sure that it's going to be a good fit for them before they'd send in their resume. So if you don't provide that option, you are absolutely stopping people from applying to your company. So hopefully we've got some decent candidates starting to come into our pipeline. Who's super happy with their current technical interview process? Yeah, nice. Excellent. So I've done about 3,000 interviews over the years and got lots of different feedback from candidates and also hiring managers. And these are some of the tips that I would recommend when you're creating your interview process. And there's going to be some people, depending on your company and your size, you'll have more or less influence on this process depending on your role. But the first one is to keep it streamlined. So ideally, you want it between 2 and 4 stages, ideally not more than that. And always set expectations with the candidate at the beginning. What is going to be the process? Who are they going to meet? How long are the interviews going to go for? What do they need to prep? Really important. Consistency. You want to be comparing apples and apples, or .NET developers and .NET developers. Have a consistent set of questions or a consistent test that you use for all type 1 candidates, type 2 candidates, type 3 candidates. It's really important that you try and have a level of consistency there. making sure it's relevant for the role. So if someone's a developer, then you want to be assessing their coding skills. If someone's going to be involved in pre-sales, you want to be assessing their pre-sales skills. If they're in user experience, you want to be assessing their design sprint or their facilitating skills. And objective is different to relevant in the sense that people can't be objective unless they've had training on how to interview. So a lot of the time, people get thrown into interviewing, or they might shadow an interview and then you're good to go, you've done a shadow. You really need to provide training for your interviewers on how to assess candidates, what equals a pass, what equals a fail, and why, how to use behavioural questions when they're interviewing, definitely unconscious bias training so that they're aware of what biases they have. I'm not sure you ever get rid of those, it's just about being aware of them. And also making sure that you've got diversity of interviewers in your process. So I had a really great fail at this last year where I'd realised after the fact that I'd had a white male from the UK interview with 2 other white males from the UK that were in the company. And that's just setting people up for failure from an unconscious bias perspective. So you want to make sure that there's diversity there. The other feedback that I've had from women who have come through interview processes is that they like to ideally get to meet a woman at some point as part of that interview process. So that's another thing that we've kind of adjusted at different companies to make sure that we do that. Demonstrable. So you need to see people's skills. You need to see what they can do. If it's a developer, they need to code, whether that's an online code test, whether it's face-to-face code test, whether they solve a problem or create an app and bring it in. If it's a UX person or a pre-sales person, one of the things I've seen work really well is where you create a scenario and a customer problem and you give it to the person before the interview, so a couple of days before, and then you ask them to come in and present on it or facilitate a workshop. You actually want to be able to see the person's skills in that interview process. And I know that can be tricky. And the final one is safe. Make people feel as comfortable as possible because you want them to perform at their best. You want to get to see the best version of them. And this doesn't mean softening our assessment. It just means being kind and thinking about things. So if you've got a giant boardroom table, don't sit them on one end and you've got 3 people on the other end. Make sure they've got water, little things like that. Think about your own best and worst interview experiences and then try and channel a better way when you're feeding into your company's interview processes. So you've checked off their skills, but just as importantly, they do need to have the right values and beliefs and attitude that are going to culture add to your team and organisation. And we all know the one bad piece of fruit analogy. So creating behavioural-based questions, behavioural-based interview questions, and I'm not sure, sorry, just to clarify, behavioural-based questions is where people need to give you a very specific example to your question. So tell me about a time when, and it's a very specific example, and it makes it a lot easier to dig deeper to make sure that they are telling you a story that actually happened. So you want to align these questions to your values or to your team charter or to the culture of your organisation. So if your value is a love of learning, tell me about a time where you learnt something new. If your value is about teamwork, tell me about a time where you've helped your teammates with something. And then follow up with lots of follow-up questions to dig into that and cover off everything. Some of my favourite questions, interview questions, this one's not a behavioural one, I just really like it. If it wasn't for money, what would you spend your time doing? Because if you're trying to find what someone's passion is, and asking them what they do if they didn't have to get paid for it or if they didn't need to work for money is a really good way to see what someone's passionate about. Some other ones I really like is tell me about a time where you've improved something or brought some innovation into your team. Tell me about the best manager you've ever had and why. And this is really good because that gives you an idea of how they like to be led and managed, especially if they're coming into your team and you'll be looking after them. Tell me about a time where you've had a difficult stakeholder and how you handled them. A lot of these questions don't necessarily have a right or a wrong answer. It's more about they give you a picture of what those person's values and what the culture is. And that may or may not fit into your organisation. So that's what it's really about. Be careful with leading questions. So most people do this before they realise and somebody tells them that they're doing it. So you get an interview and you're like, this is our company, we do this, and this is our team, we do that, and we love all these things. And you basically prep them on all of the answers they need to give you for the rest of the interview. So hold back on any of that until the end. Use the first half of the interview to ask your questions to them and to dig and get all of the information out of them, and then use the last portion of the interview to tell them about why they should come and work for you, how awesome your team is, how awesome your company is. It also has a win-win of, by that stage, if you know that the candidate's a no, you can make that section slightly shorter as well. And if you know that you really want them, you can go all in. A few red flags to look for with interviews is it was always someone else's fault. Anything to do with a mistake or failure is always because of someone else. And also complaining about management, company, other people in the team. Complaining isn't the problem, it's more, what was their role? What did they do to try and fix the problem or solve the problem? Or what ideas did they have? So complaining isn't an issue, but if you haven't tried to fix it or make a difference, then that is. So we've talked about how hard it is to attract talent. So employer brand is really important, and this is something that generally everyone can contribute to. The first one, we talked about community involvement already. So attend, host, talk, sponsor meetups. Spruik your people as well. If they're attending a meetup or if they're speaking or doing something great, whether it's personal or professional, spruik that on social media. Their personal and professional success all kind of goes together in my experience. And nominate them for awards. There's heaps of really cool tech awards out there. ARN do a whole bunch. Like, there's lots of awards that you can nominate individuals in your team for. So think about that and be proactive about that, because, like I said, it's all of your success. And if you can get your company to apply for a Best Place to Work award, these are really great, especially for attracting overseas talent, because people from overseas, unless you're an Amazon of the world, there's a lot of companies, overseas people don't know anything about their brand. And what you read on the internet, it only has so much weight. So if you can win an award like a Best Place to Work award, it really makes a big difference. I think our overseas applications went up by about 30% when one of the companies I worked for won a Best Place to Work award. So it was quite significant. And listing all your company benefits, we talked about that before. I had a client who had paid volunteering time. So everybody got 3 days or something a year of paid volunteering time, but it wasn't on any of their adverts, wasn't on their website. And I asked them why, and they were like, well, doesn't everybody get that? They don't. So use your company careers page, your LinkedIn careers page, your adverts, promote all of your benefits. And also with your careers page and LinkedIn, videos, pictures and stories are really great. So you want to show the culture. You don't just want to talk about it, you really want to show it. And the best way to do that is through videos and pictures. So on the benefits side of things, I'm just going to do a really quick activity. So 10 seconds, I want everyone to just turn to the person next to them and just tell each other what's the best benefit that your company has. 10 seconds. Best benefit. I feel like I could just leave you going and then I could just chill out for the rest of the hour. I think I could. All right. So put your hand up if the person told you about a benefit that you were like, that's really cool, I'd like that. Nice, awesome. So sometimes we don't know what other companies are doing, so it's really important to share. I really love the idea of a benefits buffet. I think, everyone's so different now. I love the idea of companies having all of these different benefits, and there's a point system or a value system, and people can actually pick and change at the beginning of each year what they want, what's important to them. So that's where I'd love to see it going. But apparently there's one company, when I was in Oslo, someone told me about one company that is doing that. If anyone else knows of any companies, come and tell me afterwards, because I'd like to know. So we've got culture, hiring great people. Now we want to ensure that we keep enhancing our culture and looking after our people. So the three areas are empowerment, development, and leadership. Empowering your team is absolutely the fastest way to scale and succeed. In my last role in Melbourne, I had 80 direct reports, which is ridiculous. So we created a leadership group, and the leadership group was about 15 people, and together we collaboratively came up with a strategy for the state, and then people were empowered to own and drive different parts of the strategy that they were interested in and they were passionate about. So it's much easier to grow and scale if you can do that. Over that 9 months, we had a 15% growth rate and we had 95% retention. So empowering people makes your life easier as a leader, but it also is what people want, and it's the easiest way to build a great team. Before I was in Melbourne, I helped the Perth team grow from 25 to 50 in 6 months, and we had a 98% employee satisfaction result, which is pretty amazing. So this stuff really, really does work. So collaboratively setting goals with the teams and with individuals is really important, because then they can decide how they get there. They have full empowerment to figure out how they achieve the goals. So that is kind of the first step. The second step is being clear and transparent about any boundaries, agreed goals or deadlines or reporting requirements that exist, because that's the only way that you're setting someone up to succeed. And also what support is available if they get stuck or if they hit a roadblock. What do they do? Who do they come to? How do they ask? Making it safe to fail. I think one of the best ways to do this is leading by example, making sure that as a leader you're asking for feedback and not afraid to take on board feedback and to keep continuously improving yourself. And making sure that your team has the right mix of skills and roles to reach their goals. So as a leader, it's our job to balance the strength areas. People love doing what they're good at. So if you can frame a team together and everyone's getting to do the thing that they love doing, it makes for a pretty fun and exceptional team. So when you're looking at your team, think about the different hats that you need within the team, whether that be a Scrum Master hat, stakeholder manager hat, a technical mentor hat, a cheerleader hat, commercial awareness, delivery management, risk management. Think about all those hats and then think about who's in your team and what people love doing, and make sure that they're all getting to do the things that they love. And also when you're recruiting into your team, you need to have that awareness as well, because somebody might have a good skill set or they might be a good cultural add, but if they don't fill the particular space that you've got available, then you need to think about whether that's the right timing for them or what else they're going to be able to do. One of my favourite books is by Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F-U-C-K. It's a really awesome book, and it talks about the fact that our brains love solving problems. And if we solve all of the problems, our brain will just create more problems, and they might not be the problems that we love solving. So it's really important that we find the problems that we love, and that we also know what the problems that our team members love as well, and then make sure that our jobs and our day-to-day work has lots of those problems. People want to keep developing their career and developing themselves. So to build a great team, you need to enable this for them. The first one is creating an objective and transparent career pathway. One of the best ones that I've seen is by Sophia, S-F-I-A. It's a really good example of a capability framework that people can use to give them control over their own progression and how they choose to or not to use it. I don't believe that leaders should have to baby people or push people in this space, but we do need to set up a framework and provide support where needed for people. The first capability framework I ever developed was on a spreadsheet, and it just had role titles and it had really clear capability descriptions. I worked with some of the senior technical people to create it. So it doesn't need to be fancy. It still did the trick. It made for something that was transparent and objective, and people could use it to progress between roles, and they knew what they needed to do. Redify had a really great open source tool, open source example called Mad Skills with a Z, because it's really cool. And that's another thing you can have a look at as an example. So transparent and objective processes relate to the promotion process, but also to salary reviews as well. And this may or may not be part of people's roles. But if it is, you need to make sure they're as objective and transparent as possible. You need to tell people when they're going to get these reviews, what you're going to be assessing, and you need to make sure that we approach people, not that they have to come and approach us and put their hand up. You know, some of the studies around the pay gap is that certain genders and certain personality types don't feel comfortable putting their hand up and asking for a pay rise, which means it just doesn't happen. So it's really important from that inclusivity perspective that everybody gets a salary review or a promotion review or whatever it is, and they know when it's going to be, and it happens regularly. And personally, I believe that the salary bands should be transparent as well. People have access to market rates, they have access to CPI. None of this stuff is rocket science. It's not a secret, even though all of our contracts say you can't talk about it. People do talk about it. So the more transparency, the better. People don't stay at jobs because of the money, generally speaking. You know, there's lots of studies around once you hit a certain dollar amount, that's not what keeps you staying at an employer. So transparency is really important. And then the biggest area is the continuous learning, growing, developing. We need to enable all of the individuals in our teams to progress with whatever learning and development that they require or that they're interested in. And there's lots of ways to do this. You can have formal professional development plans. You can have a more informal quarterly catch-up where people set goals for the next quarter. At Redify, we did retros, which was a really great process. I loved that. So it was all about people would gather feedback from their peers and then look at how to keep improving and how to keep growing. Not a fan of old school performance reviews at all. They often don't add any value. So whatever the process is, it needs to be valuable. It needs to be meaningful. If it doesn't add value, don't waste anyone's time doing it. Leadership. So I am a typical type A personality, perfectionist, high achiever, basically the recipe for the worst manager ever. In my first ever manager role, I could not keep staff for more than 6 months. I had no idea why, other than I thought they were all incompetent. I knew I could do things quicker if I just did it myself. And I didn't understand why you needed to reward or recognise people. I mean, they get paid to come to work and do their job, right? I just didn't get it. So 15 years later, getting old, I've had lots of people refer to me as an inspiring leader, which is an amazing compliment. I've helped companies win Best Place to Work awards and, as I said, 98% staff satisfaction scores. And that's not a brag because I get imposter syndrome the same as probably most of you every few weeks. But I'm sharing this with you because the easiest way to create successful change is to be an inspiring leader. And it's definitely something you can learn because if I can learn it, anyone can learn it. So what I've found is that there's 3 key things that inspiring leaders have in common. The first is that they have a vision that they're passionate about. People want to be part of something, so this earns you followers. Inspiring leaders are authentic. They know who they are, they trust themselves, and they generally have some core values that they base their decisions on. They generally know their strengths and weaknesses as well. Doesn't mean that they do anything about them, but they generally know them. And this provides consistency, so people know what to expect. And the good thing about that is that it earns you trust. And the third thing is they lead by example. They're not afraid to get in there and get stuff done and, you know, empty the dishwasher, whatever it takes, they lead by example. And this earns respect. So I've seen leaders with lots of different personality types be inspiring leaders because of these 3 things. Some of them were complete assholes, but people still followed, trusted and respected them because of these things. Perfect example, Martin Luther King, have a dream, had a vision, inspiring leader, amazing. Mr. Trump also has a vision, has a lot of followers, and could also be called an inspiring leader. So it's not enough just to be an inspiring leader. You also need to be a great leader, or you want to be a great leader. This is the type of leader where people follow you from company to company. They don't care what role they're going to be in or what they're going to be doing. They just want to work with you again because they love working with you. And there's 4 more things to add on your list of learnings. The first one is empathy. The first time I ever did a personality or psych profile, I got 0 for empathy. The coach was like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but 0. So you can learn empathy. And it's not sympathy. Empathy is literally just listening and understanding. It's acknowledging and asking questions, and then listening and understanding. That is it. Just takes practice. A lot of the time people have the answers already. They don't need you to give them the answer. You just need to listen and understand. So empathy will earn you loyalty. Instead of assuming that everyone's incompetent, assume that people are trying their best and be kind. The best way to shut down bullies and arrogance is to be kind. And this earns hearts. Learning is one of the biggest ones, similar to what I talked about around safe to fail. It's really important that we keep improving, asking for feedback and learning, and this absolutely earns minds. And then the last one is give back, help your team progress, mentor people, help your community, share your knowledge, and without looking for it or asking for it, this is what will earn you recognition. Most people have probably heard the saying, people don't leave companies, they leave managers. I've heard feedback from thousands of candidates that I've interviewed, and at least 70% of them, the reason they're leaving is because of their manager, nothing to do with their company. And the number one complaint that they had is that managers don't listen. When people come to us with a problem, there's two main ways that we generally respond. One is we want to give them the answer and solve the problem for them. Good job, move on. The other is that we want to give them reasons for why the problem exists. And that comes across as defensive and like you're making excuses. People predominantly just want to be heard and acknowledged. So next time someone comes to you with a problem or a complaint, just try listening and acknowledging how they're feeling, and then use questions to continue the conversation and ask them for their ideas on how they could fix the problem or what solutions they have in mind. Oh yeah, I'll fill those in. It's surprisingly hard to do this though, it does take practice. I had an example of this recently where we had running a training course for some of my partners, and at the end of it was like a 3 or 4 hour session, and at the end of the session the trainer went around the room and he said, oh, I'd like everyone to give me feedback. So each person took a turn giving feedback, and one person had some constructive criticism around their expectations of the trainer. It didn't hit the mark in what they were expecting. They were expecting a deeper technical depth, and it was this instead of this. So they had some constructive criticism, and the trainer straight away was like, oh, well, it wasn't meant to be that, it was meant to be this, and blah, 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 blah. It's just not necessary. People just want you to say, thanks for the feedback. As soon as you start making excuses, it doesn't matter whether it's wrong or right, it makes no difference. Just listen and acknowledge, because whether it's right or wrong, it's that person's perspective, so it's right for them. So the listening bit, you can get your head around and practice fairly easily, but there is no shortage of difficult conversations to have as a leader. I like Brené Brown's term courageous conversation, because it does take courage to be honest and transparent with people and to practice empathy. I can tell you from experience that people respect, trust and value you as a leader if you can consistently be honest and give them feedback. One of my favourite communication trainers, Georgia Murch, has a saying, nip it in the bud. And for me, that's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever had. Don't let things build up. If you hear someone or see someone do something that goes against the values of the team or the goals of the team, take them aside immediately and talk to them about it. I was sitting in my office last year, and I heard, we're open plan office, as they all are now, a junior developer and a senior developer were working together on a project, and the junior developer had gone over to the senior developer's desk, and I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I heard the senior developer say, that's not the way that you do it, just do it how I'm telling you to do it. And I was like, oh God. So then the junior developer, and he was new as well, the junior developer had only been on board for about a month, which, makes it even harder. So he went back to his desk, I jumped on Teams, waited a few minutes, pinged the senior developer. I was like, hey, do you have a couple of minutes? Let's go have a chat. Went into a meeting room and I said to him, I heard the way that you just spoke to, let's call him Bob. It sounded really harsh. Are you okay? What's going on for you? And straight away he was like, oh, I'm really stressed out. This is going on and that's going on. And then this happened and that happened. And he had a good old rant for 15 minutes or so. And I said to him, do you think that that's how you should have handled it? And he was like, no, I should have done this and I should have done that. I was like, and what do you think you should do now? And he said, oh, I need to go and apologise and blah, 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 blah. So it's an amazing thing when you just start a conversation and truly listen to someone, because generally they already know if they've done something that was a bit inappropriate or they've handled something the wrong way. But you need to give them the opportunity to talk that through and the poking that they might need to go and fix it. And I think a lot of people get really afraid that giving someone constructive feedback or calling them on their behaviour is going to ruin their relationship with them. And I think it's one of the reasons that it stops us having these conversations. But in my experience, it's the opposite. The people that I've got the closest relationships with are people who can give me very direct feedback and honest feedback, and I can do the same for them. And that senior developer and I catch up at least once a month for coffee, and he asks me for feedback and I ask him, and it's like we're friends, I guess. So I just want you to think in your head for a minute, like about a time where somebody gave you some constructive feedback and they did it in a respectful way, and whether that damaged your relationship or whether it did actually make you closer with that person. So I can have a drink break. So seeking to understand is the most important part of these courageous conversations. Brené Brown talks about the story I'm telling myself, and this is dangerous because we always do. We have a story that we're telling ourselves, but it's often not the whole story. Georgia Murch also talks about truth in a similar way. She talks about the fact that there's my truth, there's their truth, and the truth, actual truth, is probably somewhere in the middle. So really listening to people. The other saying that I love is people hear your content, but they smell your intent. So if you're not genuine about wanting to actually help someone, don't even bother. Like if you're trying to just achieve an agenda, people can smell that a mile away. So you do need to be genuine when you go into these conversations about really, really giving a shit and actually wanting to help them, not just ticking a box or trying to achieve something. So there's lots of different conversation and feedback models that work. This is mine. This is one that I like to use because it's a bit of a softer approach, but you can tailor it to make it more direct if you need. I personally just find that you don't often need to, because there's a very small percentage of people out there that are those toxic people who aren't interested and don't have good intentions. Most people I've found actually do have good intentions, and it's just up to us to help figure out what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, and treat them kindly. So the first one is tell them your truth. What is it that you've observed? With my senior developer, I told him the behaviour that I saw and what it was that I observed. The second one is understanding their truth. Now, this can take a long time. My senior developer only ranted for about 15 minutes that day, but I've had sessions with people where this bit has taken 45 minutes. So if you're going to have one of these conversations, you do need to block out some time to make sure you've got time to really let them have the space to tell you what's going on for them, because it can be easily a good half an hour. And then recommend or set expectations on what the behaviour change is. So with my senior developer, I didn't need to do that because I was able to ask the question and he gave me the behaviour change himself. But if he hadn't, I could have said to him, if you're feeling stressed and that happens again, I'd recommend that you go for a walk before you talk to the other developer. Go for a walk, blow off steam, and then come back and have that conversation. So make a recommendation about what they should do next time if you need to, or an expectation if it's a bit more serious. And then the last one is, ask them what support they need to be able to make that change. This is a win-win because A, you can find out if they've actually understood and confirmed that they are going to make the change, but also if they need extra training or support, because sometimes it might be something that they need training on to be able to make the behavioural change. And like I said, if it's a toxic person or it's very, very unacceptable behaviour, you do need to put a consequence in there. So once you've told them what the expectations are for the behaviour change, you need to add in a consequence of, if this behaviour doesn't change, it's going to get escalated to HR. Or if this behaviour doesn't change, we're going to need to look at a formal performance management plan. So if it's serious, you can slide that in there quite easily. But in my experience, it's a very, very small number that it gets to that level. But it's really important not to tolerate behaviour that's not in line with your values. It's the fastest way to destroy the culture of the team and lose the trust and respect of the other teammates in the team. So, bit of a recap slide. It takes courage to be a leader and to step into all of this instead of away from it. I do promise it gets much easier with practice, and it's a real privilege to be a leader and to be able to help people live their best lives. It's amazing. So, thank you very much, and we actually have some Q&A time. Thank you to NDC as well for having me. And there's some swag down the front for afterwards, but yeah, is there any questions? Yes? You can't. That's why we created the leadership group, so that we could kind of spread those responsibilities. What I did do was I would try and have one-on-ones at least kind of 8 weekly, which is not enough, but I would also say to everyone, if you ever need, sorry, the question was how do you do one-on-ones with 80 direct reports? If you ever need to have a one-on-one, you can reach out anytime and I will make time for you. So I kind of put a bit of onus back on them to say, if you need me, I'm here. But other than that, Barman's like, yes, I totally did that. But yeah, if you need me, reach out and I will come all the way to wherever you're working. Any other questions? Yes.
How do you go with developers in a fairly flat hierarchy where you get, say, 3 senior developers all trying to solve a problem, none of them can agree, right? And then they look at the development manager, or you decide sort of thing. You've got strong personalities where that's not the way you do it, this is the way you should do it. Any stories or advice on dealing with that?
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Because it's like, okay, there's many ways we can skin the cat, and all 3 could be, fine solutions to do, but they're all kind of looking for, someone to take the decision in a flat hierarchy.
Yeah, I guess I would, like ideally you don't want to make the decision, right? You want to ask questions and get them to figure out the decision. So I guess I would try and if you knew that there was one answer that was right, then obviously you could ask questions to get everyone else to realise that by asking the right questions to get that to surface. If all of the answers are exactly, like if you could do any of them, normally it's not though, right? And I know there's lots of ways to skin a cat, but some of them are probably messier and smellier than others, just saying. It's questions. It's trying to figure out how do you get them into a room, make sure that they know that it's up to all of us to come up with the decision. I'm not going to make the decision for you, it's all of us. So make sure that they know that this responsibility is theirs as well. It's a shared responsibility. And then questions, and try and keep that conversation going so that you can ideally align with one. Anyone else? Yeah.
If you have a direct report and no matter what you say, they take it personally, can you give me a couple of hints, tips for that?
Yeah, I think ideally you want to have a level of trust with that person already before you start giving them feedback. Like that's, I guess, my in a perfect world, you want to form a relationship with them as soon as you can so that those conversations become easier. Because if they trust you and you've got rapport with them, it'll be slightly easier. I think the wording around how it's framed as well so that people don't feel like you're saying that it's a personal thing. So it's about behaviours. It's not about you've done this. It's about when someone does this particular behaviour, this is the impact that it has on other people. So it's about behaviour and it's about impact on something that they care about. So it needs to be, what do they care about? Do they care about the other team members? Do they care about their career progression? I had a tricky conversation once with someone who was posting very negative things on our company Yammer page, and they were very defensive. I didn't have a relationship with them, but I had to have the conversation with them. And what I realised is that career progression was their most important thing. So they wanted to be a leader. They wanted to progress their career. So when I talked about the behaviour of posting these types of things, I basically said, as a leader, you need to lead by example. And the behaviours that we're looking for as a leader is people that are, being positive, or if they're posting a problem, they're also posting some solutions, or they're asking, let's do a working group to help solve these problems. So if negative things like this are being posted, I can't consider you for a leadership role. So I tied it into something that he cared about. Yeah, uppers managing is really a really important skill to learn. I've had some nightmare managers in the past. I'm really good at uppers managing now. The main thing is, so sometimes you can't give them feedback. There's no point. So I've given a manager a feedback before, some constructive feedback because he asked for it, and I silly believed him. So I gave him constructive feedback, and he basically ignored me for 6 months. Learned that lesson. So you don't always... Sometimes you can't give feedback to managers, but what you can do is you can make sure that you understand what their goals are. What are they trying to achieve? What's important to them? The same way you would do if someone was reporting into you. What motivates them? What's important to them? And then how can I make sure that whatever I want aligns with that goal, and that generally gets them on board and gets them to say yes to things and gets them to kind of back away and leave you alone if they think it's going to help their agenda. But yeah, you can't always give constructive criticism to managers. Yep.
Have you ever hired someone in who might be, they're a good person, they have the right intentions, but you've hired them at the wrong level?
Yeah, absolutely. A few times. Sometimes it's worked out, sometimes it hasn't. So I've had people that have hired at the wrong level, and within sort of, once again, nip it in the bud. So as soon as you start having the conversations, the better. So we've realised within kind of 4 weeks, all right, there's some gaps here. We've sat down with them. We've kind of gone, okay, this is where you've been hired. We've got a nice, clear capability framework that shows you what skills you should have and what capabilities you have. This is what's missing. We need to put a plan in place for you to get here. There's 2 ways to do it. One is that you can say, by the end of your probation, we need you to be able to demonstrate that you can get here. Otherwise, we'll need to change your role level. Other companies, I've also worked for another company where they just said, look, these are the gaps. We're happy to pass your probation because we think you're a good fit, and we think that you will get there within 12 months. But you need to recognise that we're only going to be able to put you in on gigs that is at this level. So there's a couple of ways there. I've had one scenario where we had the conversations with the person. It seemed like it was going okay. They passed probation, but they just couldn't get there, and we had to put them on a performance management plan, give them a bunch of training, and they just couldn't get there capability-wise, and we had to let them go. So it doesn't always work out. Yep. So succession planning, kind of. Holidays, yep. Yeah, succession planning is really important, and the model that we had at Redify, where we had the leadership group, was amazing because then you're spreading and you're getting lots of people to step up into those leadership roles and get experience. Succession planning is really, really important. I guess it's about, once again, people like working in their strengths area. So you need people that want to and are interested in the types of skills and capabilities that they're going to need if they're in a leadership role. So it's about making sure that it's those people, but they also need to want to do it. So, you need to get people a bit excited about how awesome it is to be a leader first, because that can be hard. I've worked for companies where nobody wants to step up into the leadership role because they see what's going on and they're like, nah, that's shit. So get them excited about how awesome it is to be a leader, and then give them opportunities. So give them different bits of opportunities, spread it out, let them own things and run little mini projects and take on more and more of your responsibilities. I think we have to wrap. It's 4 o'clock. Thank you so much. If you've got any questions, yeah, feel free to come and chat. And there's stickers if you want some stickers.